Hey guys, this is your High Fist. It's been a while. It's been a busy week, but hopefully, I should be able to throw out a couple of videos in the next couple of days. As always, thank you to Steven Erickson for not only sharing the videos but commenting on them as well. He left a couple of interesting comments in the last two videos, especially on the George Orwell one. He made a few observations on libertarianism and Ayn Rand, which I found really interesting, and even gave me a couple of ideas for videos. So let's see how that goes, because I have some of the same sort of observations about libertarianism as well. We are responding to a challenge today, guys, a Tiste Andii challenge. Counselor of Moonspawn, who is a new Malazan tuber like me, right? Not a YouTuber, not a booktuber, a Malazan tuber, right? Big difference. Threw out a tag or a challenge, right? Or whatever it is, the Malazan Reader Tag. And since we were challenged, we will respond to this Tiste Andii sorcery, right? I told you guys that I was the king of the Warren of Aral Gamelin, or Prince of Demons, or whatever it is that I said. But in the spirit of the Siege of Pale, right, we will see the Warren of Dark clash with the Warren of Demons with this response. So let's get to the questions that she asked. How did you find out about Malazan? So I just found out about it on the internet. I didn't really know people who had already read the series. I was just looking for fantasy books to read, and I think it was about a decade ago now, and I went through a couple of the pretty prominent writers and a couple of their books and all that, and the one that stuck the most was this series, and the rest is history. Describe your experience reading it for the first time. I was like, what the fuck is going on here? That was my sort of reaction, but it did get better. Uh, the most important thing, and I think one of the later questions is about this, about what advice we would give readers, right? And the one bit of advice I wish I had given myself when I started reading the series was pay close attention to the note that Erickson sort of puts out before the story of Gardens of the Moon starts, right? Because he lays out precisely what kind of series he intends to write. He lays out precisely what type of stories he intends to write. And most people who tend to have problems with his work being either too ponderous or slow or dense or whatever it is, it's usually because they've forgotten what Erickson specifically said he was going to do uh, at the start of the series, right? So my first impressions were, this is really confusing shit, but I'm pretty sure if I stick with it, this will be extremely rewarding. When did you realize that the series was going to be an all-time favorite? I knew as soon as I read that note from the author that if he fulfills this promise, then this will easily be my favorite work of fiction. As a reader, I would say Memories of Ice was probably what kind of really catapulted the series to the top. Although I enjoyed the first two books as well. They were confusing, but there were many things that I enjoyed about it, especially Deadhouse Gates. I enjoyed many aspects of Deadhouse Gates, but the point where I was like, okay, so he has lived up to the hype. He has delivered on the promise that he gave us before he started the series. I felt that with Memories of Ice. That was when I really sort of, it really, Memories of Ice confirmed for me that what Erickson was trying to do was in fact a successful attempt, if that makes sense. What is your favorite aspect of the series? I don't want to say the world building and the mythology and all that, because I've already said enough about that. I suppose my favorite part of it is how it's a mix of many different genres, many different storytelling traditions. Each of us, right? Let's say 100 of us write out a list of works and authors whose sort of whose writing and themes we see in the series. I'm sure we would all come up with different lists. So, for example, if I was influenced by the work of George Orwell, I can do a video on Erickson and Orwell, like I did, right? I'm a big fan of P.G. Wodehouse, right? So, Tehol-Bugg essentially to me is in many ways a fantasy sort of version of Tehol-Bugg. The climax in the Bone Hunters, right, which gave me real. When I was a teenager, I used to really devour espionage thrillers. Frederick Forsyth, Robert Ludlum, John le Carre, right? Maybe Tom Clancy here and there. And one of my sort of Robert Ludlum was always one of my favorites, and one of his. So he's the one who wrote the sort of the Jason Bourne trilogy and things like that. So one of the big tropes that he uses, one of the big sort of set piece styles he uses is this assassin running from location A to location B, and all kinds of assassins jumping in the way, highly trained assassins jumping sort of in the way to stop him, and the protagonist now having to fight his way through from location A to location B. I mean, I saw a lot of that in the climax of the Bone Hunters. Right now, does this mean that Erikson is a fan of Robert Ludlum? Does it mean that Erikson was paying homage to espionage novels from the 80s to the 90s? No, right? But this is what happens when an author puts in so much into the material. This is what happens when a writer kind of really pours himself or herself into what they write, and therefore the readers can then start using their own experiences to draw stuff from it, right? So if you're a fan of Terry Pratchett, for example, you would really enjoy the Baukelane stories, right? So I'm sure most of you would have experiences that even go beyond mine based on what you've read before, what you've experienced before. Each of us can sort of really apply that to the 10 big books especially. So I would say that's my favorite aspect of the series. Nothing is truly perfect. Share a little gripe you have with Malazan. So for someone like me who is typically not very compassionate or not very empathetic, I mean, I'm not a cruel person by any means, but I wouldn't really call myself a bleeding heart or whatever either. So that can get a bit frustrating sometimes, right? Where we are in the middle of all this cool action, and there are flying mountains and armies clashing with each other, and dragons sort of clawing at each other and fighting in the sky, and we're in the middle of this massive battle, which makes everything else in epic fantasy and science fiction look like some kind of low budget sort of Sam Raimi film, right? The sort of the visual imagery and the scope is so awesome, and then we just got a break into sort of, oh, look at the theme of sorrow here, look at the theme of suffering here, look at the theme of redemption, hope, blah blah blah, which is all, I guess, good in the rereads, and I enjoyed all of those parts in the rereads as well. But when I read them for the first time, it was like, okay, fine, guys, yes, we get it. You guys are all very empathetic, right? I get it, but can at least one of you just look up so that us as the readers can see the cool dragons fighting while you have your little monologue about suffering and hope and all that? But no, we've got to sit through the entire thing, right? So that's one thing. Another thing I suppose I could say is that because the scope of the story is so big, there will always be some kind of price to pay, right? And what I mean by that is, you will never find yourself loving all the storylines, because when there are literally sort of more than 100 plot lines and subplots and storylines in 10 books, you can't like them all, right? The best example I can give is from Memories of Ice, right? Where some people might like the Maib storyline. Some people like me would just fall in love with the Baukelane Kobold Brooch little side story, right? Some people might find the Segule cool. That's the thing. It caters to a lot of different types of readers, and it caters to a lot of different types of taste, right? Someone who likes the compassion and empathy thing would be like, the Maib was one of the best parts of Memories of Ice, right? What are you talking about with the necromancer, serial killers, and the masked swordsman and all that? Whereas I would say, what are you talking about? Who cares about all that sentimental shit, and who cares about all the Segule sort of empty video game action shit? Baukelane and Kobold Brooch, that humorous, absurdist, philosophical subplot, right, in many ways is where the gold is at. And another person might say, you're both idiots, right? The Maib storyline sucks, the Baukelane storyline sucks. It's all about the Segule and their cool fight scenes as they carve their way through this army, right? So many different readers connect with many different types of storylines is one thing I've noticed. So you will never really find sort of a book where you fall in love with every single storyline, right? Malazan is too ambitious for that. It's too epic for that. There will always be stuff that you love, and there will always be stuff that you don't love that much, right? What else? What are your favorite and least favorite installments? So, as far as least favorite goes, I think Erikson himself has kind of admitted that Gardens of the Moon is more of a deliberate sort of reconstruction or critique of tropes in the fantasy genre itself, and that those who are not familiar with those tropes might perhaps not enjoy Gardens of the Moon as much as the other books, and I kind of agree. So, for example, I am not someone who's very well versed when it comes to fantasy or epic fantasy, right? I've certainly read the books of the guys who are active right now. So I've read Brandon Sanderson and Joe Abercrombie and George R.R. Martin. Who else have I read? I've read a couple of authors, right? I've read Patrick Rothfuss. I've read the Gentleman Bastard series, the Lightbringer series. I'm not well versed. There are a couple of guys in the Discord server, for example, who can just reel out names, and I can't do that. I would say I've tried out many of the authors who are pretty famous and active right now, but for me, Gardens of the Moon is the weakest out of the 10 books, and the reason is what Erikson himself has spoken about, that it's much more of a purposeful takeoff, right, critique of fantasy tropes, while the other 9 books kind of stand on their own a lot more. My favorites usually revolve around Toll the Hounds, Memories of Ice, and The Bone Hunters. Memories of Ice was my favorite when I read it the first time, because I think, as many people have already pointed out, it's more of a normal story, so to speak, in the sense that there's a beginning, middle, and end, and everything kind of converges into one location and one storyline. There's a clear good side and bad side and stuff like that. I mean, it's all in shades of gray, obviously, in the long scheme of things, but at least for that book. So that used to be my favorite by far, but as I've read different parts of the series over and over again, others have caught up. So The Bone Hunters I love because it's the first time that we see all the plot lines from all the books converge, which I really liked and which I really, really enjoyed. And Toll the Hounds, I mean, just the last 300 pages of Toll the Hounds, right, is just unbelievable, just unbelievable stuff. Excellent writing, excellent payoff to the build-up, right, excellent use of this theme of convergence in one place. If you could combine Dust of Dreams and The Crippled God into one book, I would certainly put it up there as well, because, you know, it's just too epic not to. But considering that they're split into 2 different books, I would have to sort of give the edge to the 3 that I mentioned: Toll the Hounds, Memories of Ice, and The Bone Hunters. What is next? How many times have you read the series? So I've read the series from start to finish the first time, and since then I have read different parts of the series several times. In some cases, maybe even several dozen times. So the advantage of electronic reading, of having a Kindle or reading it on a PC, is that I can just treat them like I would treat songs. So whenever I feel like reading Quick Ben, I would just pull it up on the Kindle or my PC. I would just search for Quick Ben and I would just read Quick Ben scenes. If I'm in the mood for Tehol-Bugg, I would do that. If I'm in the mood for the Bridge Burners, the Bone Hunters, Casa Oolong, right, Icarium, all the Tiste Andii versus Edur and Leosin stuff, all of that. I've never really read the entire thing from start to finish ever again, right, in chronological order, but I have read all the books, most of the books anyway, several times, right? In some cases 20, 30 different times, even some plots, maybe even 50, right? It's kind of like a song, as I was saying. I'm sure you can all relate to a song that you guys have heard more than 50 times or more than 100 times, or if it's one of your childhood favorites, hundreds of times, right? So it's kind of like that. I can't really keep count of the scenes and the plots that I've reread. The Quick Ben stuff and all that, surely 50. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 100. Besides the Book of the Fallen, what other series from Malazan have you read? Listen, the Baukelane stories are where the gold is, right? Everybody has to read the Baukelane stories. especially The Healthy Dead, right, which I think is just the greatest story ever written, short story, novella, whatever you want to call it. And the most recent one that's up on Erickson's Facebook page is probably going to be my new favorite when I reread it. So I need to do a video on The Healthy Dead pretty quickly, because for many months now, I've been sort of constantly talking about how I think that's just the best thing Erickson's ever written, but this new one might be even better than that. So I need to make a Healthy Dead video pretty soon before the new one overtakes it. But yeah, I've read all the Ian Esselmott books and the other Erickson books as well, the Karkanos books that have come out now and all that. But the 10 big books for me are the real sort of magnet. They are what draws me, and the fact that it's a completed series, the fact that there's essentially an infinite amount of things that you can pull out of it if you want to. That's what really draws me to it. So I will always be loyal to the 10 big books, unless of course the Baukelane books become popular, right? Then fuck this channel. I will start up a Baukelane channel, and we can all talk about those stories there. What are your reading interests beyond Malazan? So I read a very wide range. Sort of, I mean, how do I sort of put this without sort of just rambling on and on? So I read a lot of fiction and a lot of non-fiction. I read a lot of really dry, technical non-fiction stuff like counterinsurgency manuals, history journals, physics and geography journals, international relations journals, and things like that. And on the complete other end of the spectrum, you will also find me reading Dragon Ball Z and One Piece and Naruto and all that, right? So on one day, I might be reading Plato's The Republic, and the next day, I might be reading cheesy fan fiction about Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, right? How about that, right? So you will find me on both ends of the reading spectrum. Final question: what advice would you give to a first-time reader? What advice I would give is, the advice I would give rather is just read what Erickson says pretty carefully before you start the series, because he tells you exactly what he's going to do. And if you don't really sort of keep that in mind, then you might be in for a bad time when you read the series. Also, remember that not everybody likes sushi, and there's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody likes spicy food. There's nothing wrong with that. Right? Not everybody has a sweet tooth. There's nothing wrong with that. If you instinctively feel that this series is not for you, then just move on to something else, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Do not torture yourself. This is not written for everybody, unfortunately, right? This is not the type of work that can be enjoyed by everybody, because it's a huge time commitment. It's a huge energy commitment. And if you don't feel that this is your type of thing, then you shouldn't be listening to people sort of who tell you that you have to try this, that this will be awesome for you. No, this will not be awesome for you. I know plenty of people who sort of gave up halfway through the series. I know plenty of people who gave up barely halfway through the first book, right? So this is like all works, like all pieces of fiction, this has an audience, and there's nothing wrong if you are not a part of that audience. If you are, however, a part of that audience, what I can tell you is, forget about the reading, right? The rereading is where all the fun is. So don't worry if something is boring or difficult to follow, or if you kind of aren't really feeling it with some character. Don't worry about that. The enjoyment of the Malazan series does not come from reading the series. It comes from rereading the series. That's when the fun actually starts. So as long as you keep that in mind, you should be able to finish it, right? So that's it, guys. That's my video. I hope I didn't ramble for too long. Hopefully, I should be able to upload something else tomorrow or day after as well, right? So thank you, guys. See you next time.